Adam Schefter has officially shut down some wild Baltimore Ravens trade talk that really shouldn't even be happening. We talk about that so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well for your continued support here over on Locked On Ravens. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage for you right here on Locked On Ravens. And we have a jam-packed episode today. Bye week officially over. Well, I guess Monday Night Football still has to happen, but week 8 for the Ravens, that's what they're looking ahead to against the Chicago Bears. And in the first part of the show, we're going to be talking about Adam Schefter shutting down some pretty wild Baltimore Ravens trade talk. Trade talk is the talk of town right now. We'll certainly get into that in the first part of the show, but there's some conversations right now that are just very wild. So we'll talk about what Adam Schefter had to say. In the second part of the show, we'll dive into the Ravens still, unfortunately, losing a little bit during their bye week. Technically didn't have a loss in the loss column, right? But still some things happened that, their bye week ended a little worse than it began. And then finally, we'll just look ahead. We'll look ahead to that Week 8 game against the Bears, how important that is, and just what this team needs to do moving forward as we've had some time to reflect on this Ravens team during the bye week. So thank you again to everybody for being here. Want to tell everybody that today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. You need to go to Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's dive into this here. Adam Schefter, he shut down some wild trade talk. And this is, again, trade talk that I do not believe should be happening in the first place. But look, the Ravens are a 1-5 football team. And when a team is struggling the way that the Ravens are, a lot of other, whether it be teams or media members or whatever it may be, they start to look at those teams and be like, hey, who from that team could be available? And that's exactly what's happening to this Ravens team. I never thought we'd be having these conversations through 7 weeks, but here we are. And there have been some people over in New England with the Patriots. So obviously the Patriots, they're playing great football. The Ravens will see them later in the season. But there's been some conversation because of Ramondre Stevenson's fumbling issues and Travion Henderson, who's looked good in spots for them as a rookie. He's still young. Well, people in New England want Derrick Henry on the Patriots. And, this was something that some radio people up in New England were talking about. And then Bill Simmons of The Ringer, he ended up talking a little bit about it as well on a Monday episode last week during his show, where Bill Simmons said, what pick will get their attention? Like our second, meaning the Patriots, what if our second on Ramondre? They got to take Ramondre. They need a running back, who used to work together, Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel. Yeah, they used to have a really great relationship once upon a time. And so I was like looking this up and I'm like, wait, there's no way that people in New England think that they're actually going to get Derrick Henry from the Ravens. And lo and behold, I was incorrect. People in New England, at least some, think that there is a shot that Derrick Henry gets traded to the Patriots. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute about like what's realistic for the Ravens at the trade deadline. But Adam Schefter, he went on WEEI Afternoons on the radio, and he talked about a lot of different stuff with the Patriots. But then one of the hosts brought up the notion of, oh, well, for the Patriots, would there be an avenue for trading for Derrick Henry? And Adam Schefter just shut it straight down and actually gave some insight into how the Ravens are viewing their second half of the season coming out of the bye week. He said, quote, no, it's not going to happen in regards to the Henry trade. He said, quote, I can tell you, I spoke to people in Baltimore. They're getting ready to make what they believe is a second half run. And then, he talked about how, that's their mindset. They want to make the run. They're not in that mode right now where they're getting rid of everybody. And then he said, quote, now my guess is if Baltimore comes back from the break and loses 2 games back to back and falls to, at that point in time, 1-7, then that last week, maybe all bets are off. And so again, even if the Ravens were 1-7, I still don't see them trading Derrick Henry. I don't think that's going to happen. But and Schefter continued on and talked about how, look, the people in Baltimore, the Ravens organization, they want to make that run. That's what their mindset is right now, is they're gearing up for that second half run. They're going to win some ball games. They're going to get back in position. Like, that's essentially what Schefter's message was during this whole thing. And obviously, there are teams in full sell mode right now. Obviously, teams like the Titans, probably the Jets, the Saints, like those types of teams, maybe Cleveland. But that's the conversation the Ravens are in right now. And that is just, it's so crazy to me that they're there. Now, what's actually realistic for the Ravens at the trade deadline? We had a couple of bonus episodes over the weekend. On Saturday, we talked about some Ravens players anonymously speaking up over the team's leadership. And on Sunday, we dove into Ian Rappaport. He had the latest on Baltimore's trade situation along with a bunch of other teams. And I'll bring that back up here today because I think it's relevant, where Rappaport reported that the Ravens are calling around the league for defensive help right now, which I think is what they should be doing, particularly in the trenches. But, Baltimore is not going to give up on this season, in my opinion. I get it. It looks bleak. They're a 1-5 football team. They've looked terrible on the field defensively. They've been banged up. They've been injured. Even when they were healthy, the defense didn't look good. Even when Lamar was putting up 30-plus points, they couldn't find ways to win games, even 40-plus points. Like, it's been bad this season. But even if, this team, let's just go over Schefter's scenario real quick, right? Let's say they lose their next 2 games. That would be against the Bears. And then I just felt a shiver about the possibility, I'm not even kidding, of losing to the Dolphins. That would be, I don't even know how to. We've had some passionate episodes of the show this season, particularly after games. If they lose that game to Miami on Thursday night, oh man, I don't even know what would happen. If that is the scenario Baltimore is facing, I still don't think they'd move off of guys like Derrick Henry. Now, Mark Andrews, that's a different conversation. Maybe if they feel like they're not going to re-sign a guy, maybe that's someone else, right? Like an Andrews, for example. They have a lot of other decisions to make, like a Linderbaum, likely Jones. I'm not saying they're going to trade any of those guys, but those are the decisions that are going to have to come down the pipeline. If they go 1-7, I think that at the very minimum, they're just going to treat it as a rebuild year for them, or retooling, I guess is the better word. And then at an absolute maximum, they're still going to treat it as a retooling year, but maybe with some changes in the coaching staff, which I think if they don't make the Super Bowl, I made that very clear last week, I think need to happen. But I just don't understand from a Ravens perspective why they would move off of Derrick Henry when he just signed an extension. He has stated he wants to, finish his career out in Baltimore. It wouldn't make any sense, especially because this is not a team that all of a sudden it's just like this is their last shot. It's not. And Henry still has good football ahead of him. So, that's kind of beyond the conversation, but it's still relevant because, again, as I said, that's where the Ravens kind of fall right now in terms of, how they are viewed potentially, not maybe in league circles. I think people around the league understand that, hey, Baltimore's gearing up, but in certain other circles like media or other things, yeah, Baltimore's a team that may be open for business. And I'm not sure how that's going to work. I said on the show yesterday, the bonus episode we had, that I think that the Ravens should probably be a little of both. And that's kind of what I talked about with Mark Andrews, where I think that the Ravens should do what they did with Odafe Oweh. They understood that they weren't going to re-sign Oweh. It wasn't going to work out. And so what did they do? They traded him for a player that they thought could help immediately, and maybe they can re-sign him. He gets a head start in the Ravens defense potentially if they want to re-sign him for next season. And you also get a little bit of an upgrade in draft capital. Now, I'm not as concerned about the draft capital, and I don't think a lot of people are at this point, right? I think that for a lot of people right now, it's kind of like, who cares about the draft capital, right? I feel like a lot of it now is, all right, well, who cares? They have 5 fifth-rounders. They shouldn't use all 5 of those fifth-rounders. But I would trade Andrews for help. I wouldn't trade him for another safety. They don't need any more safeties. I would trade Andrews for more of a defensive lineman, an edge rusher, even an offensive lineman. That's what I would do. I would say they probably should be a little bit of both, buyers and sellers. But they also need to trade away some of those picks. I truly believe that. I don't think they need to go into full sell mode and here are all of our pieces. We're going to retool. But I don't know. Maybe they trade Jaire Alexander. The Jaire thing has been terrible for them. I don't even know what the deal is. I mean, maybe they move off of Jaire for someone that can help more immediately. I don't know. Keaton Mitchell's been a trade candidate. I don't think that they should move off of him. I think it'd be a mistake to trade Keaton Mitchell, but maybe they do, maybe they do. That's something that also would kind of fall into that category of trading away a guy to get help elsewhere, which I don't think would be a smart move for Keaton, or for the Ravens trading Keaton, but it kind of is what it is there. So again, the Ravens aren't going to be this team that oh, here are our stars, go ahead and take them. I mean, they're going to try to compete this season. That was clear in what Adam Schefter has said. It's been clear in the messaging that the Ravens have given us over the course of the last handful of weeks. They're just going to ride it out here, They're going to see what happens. And I still think that they need to build up a lot of their trenches, which is just so hard to do during a season. This is what the offseason is for. And the Ravens are essentially trying to build up multiple positions in the middle of a season. That's really tough. So you're probably going to have to settle for guys that other teams don't want, or there's a logjam somewhere. And, there are positives and negatives to that. But, it doesn't shock me that, what Adam Schefter has heard is that the Ravens are gearing up for a second half run. And of course, it's the least shocking thing in the world. This team is not going to trade Derrick Henry. They will not trade Derrick Henry. I would be absolutely floored if that were to happen. And we're going to see how it unfolds. Henry can help this team this year, can help this team in the future for the next couple of seasons. So trade deadline is still very much a relevant topic in Baltimore, but not to the point where, they're just going to completely dismantle this team and start from scratch. As long as you have Lamar Jackson, you have a chance, go out there, get some pieces to try to help this season. And look, if it doesn't work, then hopefully those pieces will be in Baltimore for a couple more years. I'm not necessarily on the rental side of things this year. I know Gilman is that, the Lohi Gilman, the safety they traded for, but I'd much rather see them go out there, get some guys that they'll have for next season, because again, this season, there's still that sliver that's open. The door's open a little bit. It's a very small sliver. We're coming up in the second part of the show. We'll talk about how the Ravens ended up losing even on their bye week a little bit. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's sad. Software at a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance. All in one place, they've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, Rippling removes the bottlenecks, busy work, and silos your software created. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. That's rippling.com/LockedOnNFL for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. Love how quick it is. You can make your lineup in under a minute. My favorite part, PrizePicks just added stacks, so if I want to ride with a player, I can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click, and the new injury reboot feature. If your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. There's a special max discount promotion live on the board right now for the Golden State Warriors versus Los Angeles Lakers game on October 21st. Steph Curry is discounted to only needing more than half a point to win. Mix and match players from football, basketball, and baseball to build your dream lineup today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Coming out of the Ravens bye week is now the Ravens look ahead to week 8 and hopefully getting some wins on the board. Appreciate everybody for being here today again, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage and content for you again as we have the regular show Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during games. We have instant reaction shows after games as well as just after any piece of Ravens big news. We have Locked on Ravens Squad show twice a week with Sam Njoku, as well as former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail and myself on there as well. It's actually coming up tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time if you want to check that out. So much content and coverage for you over here on Locked on Ravens. But despite the fact the Ravens had their bye week, some bad Ravens things still happen. Now, didn't necessarily directly involve the Ravens, but it still is not great. The Ravens through 7 weeks now are in sole possession of last place in the AFC North after the Browns beat the Dolphins in week number 7. So the Browns pick up their second win before the Ravens do. And, the fact that we're even in this situation, kind of like what we talked about in the first part of the show, was just absolutely crazy, if we're being honest. And look, I mean, it's wild that now the Ravens have fallen fallen to last place and didn't even have to lift a finger to do so. I've talked about over recent seasons, because the seasons were better in the regular season, how, oh, look, the Ravens, they didn't even lift a finger, and, they won the bye week like they were big winners coming out of their bye week. Well, I got to keep the same energy when it happens the other way. And unfortunately, it's just been that kind of season for the Ravens this year. So the AFC North, as it stands right now, Pittsburgh is at the top at 4-2. And thanks to Joe Flacco, we're always a Raven at heart, that is not 5-1. The Bengals, thanks to Joe Flacco, are 3-4. So they're climbing back to 500 potentially for them. The Browns, I mentioned, they won. They are now 2-5. And the Ravens, they are 1-5. The Ravens, and it's kind of weird to look at some of these stats in division where Baltimore, they've scored the second most amount of points in the division. It's honestly pretty close between the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Bengals. 150 for Pittsburgh, 144 for Baltimore, and 136 for Cincinnati there. But the points allowed, I think, tells a story where Pittsburgh's defense has only allowed 140 points. Cleveland's defense has been great. They've only allowed 152 points. Baltimore's defense, 194, and Cincinnati's defense is also just awful. They have given up 214 points there. So the point differential, Pittsburgh is +10, Cleveland -39, Baltimore -50, and Cincinnati -78. Just for reference, the worst team in the NFL in terms of point differential is Tennessee at -96. Cincinnati has the second worst mark in the league there. So again, Baltimore's in that territory. Like, they're in that territory, which is so weird to think about. But it wasn't even just the AFC North situation. In the conference, when you're looking at tiebreakers potentially and division record, Baltimore right now is 1-0 in the division. And honestly, like, that's one of the better things for the Ravens right now, because they still have 5 opportunities to beat division rivals. And if they are fighting for the AFC North, which I know some people still believe they can, and technically it is possible, as Pittsburgh's schedule gets very, very difficult and Baltimore's schedule does open up, that division record is going to be huge. But then you get to conference record. So if you're competing for seeding in certain areas, Baltimore right now is 1-3 in the conference. For reference, both Pittsburgh and Cincinnati right now are 3-1. Buffalo is 3-1. New England is 3-2. The Colts are 5-0. The Chiefs are 2-2. The Broncos are 3-2. The Chargers are 4-1. So these are all teams you're going to be competing with. Even a team that beat you in Houston, who's 2-3 right now, they're 2-1 in the conference. So Baltimore's conference record, not great right now, but they're going to be playing a game outside of their conference in week number 8 against the Bears. And another reason why the bye week, this technically doesn't have anything to do with Baltimore, but it's who they're playing this upcoming week. Chicago Bears are on fire right now. They're 4-2, and they are playing incredible football right now. They lost their first 2 games. They've won their last 4. They're on a 4-game win streak. Caleb Williams looks confident. That defense is forcing turnovers left and right, and they had a really impressive game, in week number 7. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team matches up, because I think a lot of people before the season started kind of pegged this game as an easy win for Baltimore. And obviously circumstances have changed both in how Baltimore has performed this season and also how Chicago has played. But man, I'll tell you, for a team that entered the bye week in a bad spot and you're coming out of it in last place in your division, I mean, that's that's tough. Now, the good news is that, John Harbaugh, and we talked about this on yesterday's show too, he does see light at the end of the tunnel for some of these injured guys. Lamar Jackson, Roquan Smith, both expected to play. It doesn't mean they're going to, but at least that's the expectation. So that's good at least. And then, you have a couple of other guys as well, like it'll be a Wouzier, Pat Ricard, that hopefully will be back as well. So look, there's a lot for the Ravens right now that could go well if guys get healthy. But again, what I look more so defensively, and even when Abike was healthy, the defense was not playing well. Now they had an encouraging game, I'd say, at least more encouraging than we've seen. That game against the Rams where they only gave up 17 points. The Rams, by the way, demolished the Jaguars abroad. So, maybe that's a little Baltimore luck with practicing at Camden Yards and whatnot and staying in the city. So we'll see if that rubs off on anybody else. But, I think that right now, at least the defense played better in week 6. It's really all I can hang your hat on. I mean, it really is. I know the Rams, they made some mistakes that helped, but every team makes mistakes. So for Baltimore, man, this is a huge week upcoming. We've talked about must-win scenarios, for the past month now, it feels like. But this one really does feel like the encapsulation of what a must-win is. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about that, what this game means for the Ravens, and how the result could impact the season in a big way. So stay tuned, plenty coming your way on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. And look, the last time the Ravens played in week 6 wasn't a great game, but maybe from the Rams side of things, or the Ravens played, maybe you had Kyron Williams anytime touchdown or Tyler Higbee anytime touchdown. If you had that, you were probably living large over on FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Coming out of the bye week for the Ravens, big Week 8 matchup with the Chicago Bears on the horizon. It really could define their season. And again, thanks for being here. We're 5 days a week for you, plus more on Locked On Ravens with daily Ravens coverage. So be sure to tell a friend or a family member if they want daily Ravens coverage. We have them covered just like we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. And of course, you can follow me over on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at KStriker34. I'm telling you, we've had the must-win conversation a lot here on the show over the last month. We do game day episodes during the mornings of games, and the last handful have been, hey, this is a must-win, and it was a different type of must-win every time. I wasn't saying the season's done. They lost, week 4 to the Chiefs, or, week 5 to the Texans. But now you're looking at a week 8 game against the Chicago Bears. And we talked about in the second part of the show, they're hot coming in. So if they lose this game and you're 1-6, I think that essentially shuts the door on the season officially. Look, teams can make crazy comebacks and wild things, but I'll stand on this for the entire week. I think if they lose this game to Chicago, there is the hope is done for me. Like, there's still that sliver. I've said it. The sliver is very, very thin for me in terms of how the team can turn this season around. They need just off the field to get the vibes better. All the on-field stuff we talk about, the defense ranking bottom 5 in almost every major statistical category, some of the turnover issues they've had, the penalty issues they've had, the coaching issues they've had. You need to figure out what's going on off the field first, because, John Harbaugh can say whatever he wants. The players can say whatever they want. Something is off. In fact, a lot is off. You want to talk about losing the bye week. Well, the Ravens and their CJ Gardner-Johnson situation was ridiculous. I mean, that whole thing happening and them not communicating or him not understanding the role. I don't know what happened. I don't. But that whole situation adds to about a calendar year of a lot of drama going on within the organization that, really hasn't happened a lot. At least that's not what they're known for, right? It's not what they're known for. So I don't really know where they go if they lose this game. Again, I'm not saying in the first part of the show, they're going to trade Derrick Henry. No, they're not going to trade guys like Derrick Henry and the core players who can help them win next season. But, we've said it every week, man, 1-3, really bad spot to be in. 1-4, really bad spot to be in. 1-5, really, we just continue to say it. And the team that had the worst record, there were a couple of them, the worst record to be in the playoffs last year was 10-7. So, you already kind of have to go 9-2 in order to get just to that record. But if you lose against the Bears, you're in a really bad spot. So, you should always, the Ravens are always going to try to win with Lamar out there. He's going to make a huge difference. If they have Lamar in that Rams game, they definitely win it. I get it, right? But it's not just Lamar, and it's honestly unfair to the Ravens. And it's unfair what John Harbaugh has honestly said about Lamar. To essentially, he didn't say it outright, but he essentially said, "Save my job again, Lamar." Right? That's what it feels like, because this team, Lamar is an incredible player. Right? He can do so much. He can make up for so much weakness on a roster or teammates or coaching or whatever it may be. But it's unfair to ask him to do that all the time. And the Ravens seemingly have asked him to do that a lot over the course of his career. Now, they've gotten him better weapons over the course of his career. Early on, it was bad how they handled that situation, not getting him a guy in there that could really help him and be that player at the wide receiver position in particular. But even still, it's they're asking him to mask poor offensive line play. They're asking him to mask poor defensive play. That's not fair to me to ask of Lamar Jackson each and every single week. And I get it, right? Sometimes Lamar doesn't play well and the defense has to pick him up at times, right? I'm not saying that every week Lamar does save this team or is successful in saving this team. But, you're in a situation right now where you do need your best player to step up and perform for you, but you also need the players around him and the coaches around him and the organization around him to do the same thing. So there's a lot right now that goes into, what will define this team, but it starts with a win on Sunday. This is literally, I know that some people think they're saying take one game at a time. Come on. But legitimately, this is the time where that is necessary. You cannot look too far ahead. You cannot look to a game in December at this point, or even postseason. There's no postseason at this point. They play like this right now. The Ravens, and another way that they lost the bye week actually was the draft order. Technically, it's because they had the bye, right? But they dropped from the 3rd overall pick to the 5th overall pick, which is wild. We are talking about draft positioning right now, but where they are, they still have a top 5 pick, which is wild through the first essentially almost 2 months of the season. This is not a Ravens organization that is used to picking that high a lot. And I would hope that they don't pick that high this season in terms of they're able to get back on track, make the playoffs, and get to the Super Bowl. But let me tell you, it's not looking good. It's not looking good for that right now. And honestly, if we're talking about chances and percentages and stuff, yeah, there's a shot to go and make a magical run. There always is. But again, I don't think a lot's being fixed on the field unless they fix what's off of it first. And whatever that is, whatever's going on, they need to make something happen there. And complacency is not going to cut it, right? I mean, if they do end the season, on a weak note, or if they continue playing this week, or, whatever it may be with that, lack of fire, lack of passion, which is apparent. It's apparent on the field. And I'm not saying it's a player-driven thing. But like, you can tell like the guys in the organization right now, just it's tough all the way around. They essentially gave up in that Rams game in the fourth quarter, which was, in my opinion, pretty disgusting to watch. So there's a lot that they have to figure out, but has to come quickly. You don't have a lot of time here. There's not a lot of runway for you to make mistakes. You have to be nearly perfect, and the Ravens are going to have to hold that standard for themselves for the rest of the season. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the web, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We'll be back here tonight with the Locked On Ravens squad show at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time with myself, Sam and Joku, and former Ravens receiver Kajer Ismail. Plus, we'll be back tomorrow with a regular edition of the show at 6 a.m. Eastern time. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.